Welcome to The Breakaway with David and Fabian, your new news show. Our first day in studio in person. I got Mr. Fabian here next to me, your host as well right here, David. Let's go ahead and cheers, toast to a great start, great show. Guys, as you guys can see, we're in person for the first time in an amazing studio that we built here in a few days. And we're going to have such an amazing adventure with you guys. We are obviously going to have our daily morning news shows like this. We're going to have some podcasts, some behind the scenes vlogging, a bunch of stuff. Is that right, Fabian?
Yeah, it's going to be incredible. We are so happy to be here. We took a few months hiatus to create this beautiful studio for you. And David and I are going to be bringing you daily news and updates the way that you know that we do it, bringing you the truth and all of the truth and nothing but the truth. So help us God, whether or not it gets us shadow banned even harder on Instagram. But the world is changing very, very quickly. It's one of the most exciting times and scariest times to be alive right now. We have communism is back. We have, rampant immigration breaking down countries. We have riots in England right now. We have the stock market crashing right now. It is a very scary time to be alive, but we're going to try to bring you exactly what is happening behind what they're telling you, what is happening. So I'm excited to get started.
Me too, man. And it's going to be exciting. Like you said, we took a little break, but now we're back to it. So I'm super excited about it. And let's go ahead and kick off the news show. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So on the dock today, what do we have? Well, obviously you woke up this morning probably seeing some crazy stuff that the stock market is down tremendously. We'll give you the numbers here in a second, but people are panicking, and it's not just a United States issue, it's a global issue. So we're going to look into that in a second. We also went to a Trump rally. As soon as I picked up Fabian from the airport, we went straight to a Trump rally, talk about the chances of that. And we ran into a lot of Trump supporters, but we ran into some protesters as well. So we're going to look at the protesters and actually show you guys what we saw there, because there's a lot of organized stuff there. And the last thing as well is Trump versus Kamala. We got to look into these polls. We haven't done any poll updates in almost 2 months. Of course, we have to start the show with incredible polls like this. So, Fabian, you excited?
I'm excited. Let's start it because something massive happened today. Actually, we kind of already knew what was going to happen last night with the futures market and pre-market, but the stock market has had its worst day since what?
Like 1930s or something like that, like Black Monday. They're calling this, again, it's Monday today, Black Monday. And if we've experienced this in the past. So CBS actually wrote this article. Dow plunges more than 1,200 points in fears of U.S. economic slowdown. Briefly read it. The stock plunged for a third consecutive trading day, with Dow shedding more than 1,200 points, growing fears of an economic downturn sparked by a sharp slowdown in hiring and weakening consumer spending. On Twitter, you will see Democrats saying that this is because Iran is perhaps waging a war in the Middle East. It has nothing to do with that. We received horrible unemployment numbers. It's just going to start to get worse and worse here. So we actually, before we go into our video, I just want to show you guys how much has been wiped off the market. So Fabian, what if I told you that $1 trillion was wiped off the market cap just because of 10 stocks? Stocks like Nvidia being down 325 billion. Apple down 300 billion, Meta down 80 billion, Google down 200 billion, Amazon down 135 billion. What do you think about that?
You know, this all comes back to what I've read about George Soros, which he profits during chaos. We know he's done this during when he crashed the British pound. And we know that in his book, which is called, he invented something which is called reflexive alchemy, where he talks about the fact that you make money during points of chaos. And he said for a very long time that America is an overvalued asset. This is his direct words. And that the bigger the bubble, the more money you can make. And we're seeing him funding all of these protests and things like that. And we're going to talk about a little later on. Now we see the culmination of him spending millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars on this.
What do you think is going to be? Do you think elites are actually going to profit from the stock market essentially going down like this?
I think every time that this happens, they siphon more and more money. I mean, it happened in 2008, it happened in 2012 to a certain extent. And now it's happening again. And every time, all we see is more money gets sucked up to the very top, and the people at the bottom have less and less. It's the erosion and the degradation of the middle class, which is what made America.
Yeah, that is very true. Well, the crazy thing about this is that now we have professors, some very, very prominent economic advisors and professors saying that perhaps we need to bail out the stock market right now. We need to bail out these big businesses. So we have a professor, we have a video that we're going to queue up here in a second about a prominent professor calling for a 1.5% rate cut by the Fed. And how is it going to look? He's going to tell you here in a second. But 0.75% cut in an emergency meeting today, and another 0.75 cut next month in September. So why don't we pull up Professor Siegel and see what he has to say?
This may surprise me. I'm calling for 75 basis point emergency cut in the Fed funds rate with another 75 basis point cut indicated for next month at the September meeting. And that's minimum. The Fed funds rate right now should be somewhere between 3.5% and 4%.
And there you have it right there. So economists are already calling for rate cuts. Fabian, what do you think about that?
I know that nothing is random. Everything is pre-planned. So all of a sudden yesterday, the media was talking about the economy's great, blah, 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 everything's going good. Just like when Biden was very fit for service, right? When Biden was sharp as a tooth or sharp as a nail. And then the next day, he's senile. And the next day, Kamala Harris is the one that has to take the banner. A few days ago, things were trekking along. The market was good. Tesla was at 280. Everything was going great, right? And then today, recession, Black Friday. Like, how does this happen one day to the next without any indication? Are people that stupid? Like, people were caught so off guard that it randomly happened? Of course not.
Well, why don't we look at what Trump said? Because Trump has but has warned us for the last 4 or 5 years that this is going to happen. So this morning, after waking up and seeing this news, he truthed, stock market's crashing. I told you so. Kamala doesn't have a clue. Biden is sound asleep, which is true. All caused by inept U.S. leadership, which is true, 100% true. There are policies that are being passed by Democrats that believe in this new monetary theory that we can just spin as much as we want to because we own the U.S. dollar, is essentially causing a lot of this stuff. And we'll look at polls here in a second of who average Americans trust when it comes down to the economy. Is it Republicans or Democrats? And it's not even close. So we'll get into that in a second. Fabian, what do you think about this whole idea? Will today's event be a major factor for the election?
I mean, look, you already have companies like war companies that are surging. I know they surged the other day as well. This is what we saw all over again after January 6th, where you have police camera companies and war companies surging. We have calls where apparently Israel is now thinking about going to war with Iran and Israel and Hezbollah, and everyone's getting involved. We have chaos, and this is exactly what the globalists want: is chaos. Because in times of chaos, you can siphon more money out of the people. You can siphon more laws and privacies, remove their privacies and remove their liberties, like we've seen happen after 9/11. So in times of chaos, they come in and they swoop and they usurp what it is that makes us sovereign countries. And this is just the next step in that. But I think the big difference now is that we have Twitter. And I can't emphasize that enough. We have Twitter, and that's the ability to have information and decide for ourselves exactly what's happening. And I have to rely on mainstream media to do so.
I want to say, do you find it funny that Democrats have said, well, Kamala, Biden, they've done such a great job with the economy. That's why the economy is so good. And the second that something like this happens, they say, well, the president and the administration, the executive branch don't have any influence over the economy. They don't even impact it whatsoever. And now going back and forth with it, right? So they made the economy better, but now that it's going bad, they don't have anything to do with it. It's classic hypocritical.
Well, I saw a meme today that says Biden was senator for 36 years, vice president for 4, president for 4, or vice president for 8, whatever. And then he blames everything on Trump. Like, how exactly does that make any logical sense? But this is Democratic logic right here. And it makes zero sense. And the people are starting to wake up, and they're starting to realize that this is all pre-planned. People at the top just want to keep eroding the middle class, because if you have no middle class, what do you have? A bunch of people who want revolution. This is what Karl Marx said. The middle class is the biggest detriment to us having a socialist revolution. We have to get rid of the middle class because everyone's so poor that they want change, and they will take anything to bring about that change.
They definitely will. And what I find even more interesting is that when they've been talking about the economy all the time, they're saying, well, the economy is doing good. That means the middle class is doing good. But the middle class has been hurting with these price goods going way up, gas going up, rent going up, mortgage going up. All of this impacts the middle class. So even though the stock market has been historically fantastic, doesn't mean that middle America feels that.
Exactly.
Now we have middle America, not benefiting from what's happening on the stock market. The stock market is now crashing. And now we're actually seeing the reality of Democrat policy, of these progressive policies where they don't care about the middle class. And like you said, they want to erode the middle class as much as they can, right? They don't want to have a middle class. And And they want to ensure that they depend on the government as much as they can. They depend on these elites to do everything that they can. So what do you think, Fabian? Any final thoughts?
You know, I think if you're out there, you have 401ks, you're scared of what's going to happen. Unfortunately, this is all have been pre-planned. The election's coming up, so we know what's going to happen. Things are going to get crazier. I mean, think about what year we've already had. We've had cyber attacks that have taken down, that have grounded all planes basically in America, and thousands of companies have not been able to do their work. We've had an assassination attempt on the president of the United States. Now we have a stock market crash, right? We've had a usurpation, basically a bloodless coup, and Kamala Harris taking over, the presidential nomination. We've had, I mean, it's just insane, and it's not going to stop because they want to keep things as quickly, do things as quickly as possible. As Bezmenov said, this is the time of, it's like a 1 year period of
destabilization.
Destabilization.
Yep. Because after you destabilize things, imagine a year continuously of this going on. In a year, you won't care about it. That means that you have normalized the situation. And that's what Bezmenov, a former KGB officer, talked about when they try to ideologically subvert an entire nation. It's a slow process because you got to demoralize them first. But once you get to that point of where you can destabilize and normalize that situation, you can realistically do whatever. People are so demoralized at that point that if price of goods are now 100% more than what they were just a year ago, then they're going to adjust to it. They're going to say, okay, well, now I can't afford bread. No problem. At least I got my eggs. And that's how they're going to go about life. And the elites are going to continue flourishing and enjoying all of that.
And the scary part, and the last thing I'll say is, when you have such complete chaos around you and there's nothing, and you can't even count on having food the next day, you will give up your rights for normalcy. You will give up your rights to have some semblance of a regular life that you used to have. And that's the scary part, and that's what they're trying to drive us into. So you cannot acquiesce to that. You cannot acquiesce. You have to keep fighting, because otherwise, that's the ball game.
That is the ball game. Well, there you have it for this stock market plummeting this morning. And of course, we can get into more detail, but we want to go to our next story here. Do we take a little commercial break?
Let's do a little commercial break.
We'll take a little commercial break, and then we're going to take you with us inside Trump's rally and also talk to some protesters and what we also noticed there. We'll be right back after a commercial break.
We had quite a day yesterday. 2 days ago, we went to the Donald Trump rally here in Atlanta, Georgia, where we are recording from and where the Breakaway Studios are located at. And something interesting happened because while we were at the rally, there was, of course, tons of patriots. Donald Trump was inside of the convention center. Unfortunately, I landed a little too late and we couldn't get there on time. But we did talk to a lot of patriots. We were interviewing people from all walks of life, Black, white, Asian, everything, all saying the same thing. However, there was a group of protesters. And these group of protesters are exactly the kind that you think. It's almost like your template for anti-Trump protest. You had a few trans flags, some queer flags, some Palestine flags, right? Just the regular stuff. Then you had people who were following us around, which we didn't notice at the very beginning. So I've been to a few of these rallies, and what you have to notice in people, if you're out there thinking about like what is going on, you have to realize that every protest is pre-planned. They're right in the middle of the Trump supporters. So what they do is they contact the police and say, hey, we'd like to have a counter protest at this event. So this is pre-planned, this is organized. And there's a person who's in charge of that organization. So they get the spot right in the middle. They have Trump supporters on the left and on the right. They're right in the middle. Cops are guarding them. Now, David and I wanted to talk to some of these counter protesters to see exactly what was going on. And curiously enough, nobody would talk to us. Nobody would talk to us except for one guy. And this gentleman, and I think we have the video queued up. This gentleman had been following us the entire time, making sure that nobody would talk to us because he was a leader. So I want you to understand that this is completely organized. This is completely falsified. Everyone in this protest were paid, and the leaders get paid more. And I know, David, you had a video just not too long ago where you exposed all this. You actually exposed the companies that were paying it, and you got paychecks from the people, and it's just absolutely incredible.
It's crazy.
But we want to show you a clip of this protest and see if you can notice a gentleman following us around in a little yellow vest.
All right, we finally found some counter protesters. It's literally a tiny dot of them. We want to see if they'll answer any of our questions. Let us know what they're protesting against. They won't let us. They don't answer very much. Well, we might just give it a try. What are you guys protesting?
Palestine will be free.
Can you say anything but a chant?
To the river.
Only chants? Do you know what you're protesting?
Palestine will live forever.
Only chants here, guys. I don't know.
Palestine
Can you
will
answer?
live forever.
Anything but something. I know, but anything but chants?
Ceasefire now.
Anything but chants?
Ceasefire
only got
now.
chants. We don't know what ceasefire for what.
Ceasefire now.
Ceasefire plenty of times. We don't know what's going on. Maybe we can find somebody else. Does anybody else know what they're protesting? Do we know what they're protesting?
Palestine is not your home.
Does anybody want to have a conversation? A conversation. I just want to have a policy conversation. Can you tell us what we're protesting here? What are we protesting?
That's crazy. So the reason I wanted to pause it right there, Fabian, is because that person that I walked up to in that construction vest, we walked up to him in the first minute and a half of that video. Well, that video goes on for 5 minutes. And on the 4th minute, he came back to us. And, you know, when I was going around to people and saying, hey, listen, can you tell us what you're protesting and whatnot? He suddenly, after me saying this to 6, 7 people, came up to me and was like, hey, I'll tell you exactly what's going on. And then afterwards, when you and I were looking at the actual footage, we noticed that the entire time that we were walking in their bubble, he was following us. And you actually said that, listen, I've ran into this previously at some protests. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the way it works is like this. And so I'm going to expose, if you're a leftist, you already don't like me. So here's the way it works. First, you have the protesters who are paid. And their job is to be on the microphone, to be, or to be, do something, hold a sign, shout certain things. They follow the lead of the leader whose job it is to start chanting different things. So they'll go from Palestine to gay rights to anti-Donald Trump to anti-fascist stuff. And you follow this procession of pre-arranged chants. So the protesters that are getting paid, you hold a sign and you just basically parrot what is being said. Easy enough, making $30 an hour. It's a rough economy. I get it. But if you want to sell your soul for that, then, you know, that's on you. Then you have leaders who are in yellow vests. And these people come and they are in charge of the protesters. Again, as I said, the protesters are not allowed to talk to people like us that just want to ask questions because they don't want the wrong word getting out. They don't want them looking dumb. Clearly, these people don't understand what they're saying. They're just chanting to make money. So besides that, you also have people who take pictures of us. So there was a photographer for the counter protesters taking pictures of us, and their job is to take pictures of anyone who they deem to be anti whatever they are, who are causing disruptions. And then they create what are called mind maps. So as detectives try to solve murders, they have pictures and say, okay, this guy's connected to him, and then he's connected to him. This is what they do. And I've seen some of these, and they go into churches and they look at leadership, and they look at the families of leadership and the schools of that the children of the leadership go to. And then they have, as we saw, the lady on the microphone that was actually singing the stuff. And then we have instigators. So if we would have done anything, they would have filmed us. If we would have shoved someone, started, some kind of physical altercation with them, their job is to film us and then put it on social media and say, look at this person. Do you know who they are? That's how they try to get you and scare you. That's how they try to scare you into not doing anything. And I've seen this happen. I've seen physical altercations happen where somebody will come out of nowhere with the camera, and all of a sudden, now this was our rally. This is a separate rally. We were having a rally for Adam Vina, a father. We were at the courthouse in Pasadena. And they come, they start essentially causing physical violence, and someone's filming it. Then they all leave at once. So it's pre-orchestrated. It's all a show. It's all a show for you to believe that there's people that are bad people on the right assaulting people on the left. And it's just the way it is. So I want people to understand that and know that it's all a facade funded in part by George Soros' Open Society Foundation.
It is. And so just real quickly, those people that are in the vest, they essentially, if I have it right, if you cause any trouble, and let's say I was causing more trouble than I already was, well, the second step to them just coming up to me and saying, hey, you got to get out of here, is that all the people in this construction vest would have made a circle around me, not touching me. And they already pre-trained to this because they have weekly trainings, daily trainings, actually on certain campuses here in Atlanta, where they will learn how to push you out of there without physically actually touching you. Yeah, they're going to push me, but they'll create a circle around me. They'll say 3, 2, 1, go, and take a big step forward to get me out of that protest zone. And that's how they'll kick me out of there little area. The other thing I want to mention is that this rally was actually at Georgia State University. For people that don't know, it's a college campus. It's a big college campus here in Atlanta. Well, when I did my investigation into the encampments and understanding how much these people are getting paid by the Open Society and various organizations, well, the community leaders of the college that organized this thing in the first place, they get paid between $3,000 to $6,000 a week to organize this. 40 hours of work. 8 hours of work. 8 hours of work to receive $3,000 to $6,000 compensated. So it always leads me back to the idea that when we came there, it was so organized. Why is it organized? Because it's well-funded. If something is well-funded, you can organize it, and then you can create these certain tactics. So on a daily basis, you train how to push people out and whatnot. So Fabian, this had to be one of the craziest things.
And I was at the UCLA protests as well, where the cops went against protesters. It was a big protest, thousands of people there. That was one of the originals right after Columbia, I believe, after the Columbia one.
It was essentially all the massive encampments that were happening, but the starter of it was Colombia, and it was like a blueprint for them, right? They saw it. They were like, they achieved the encampments. How did they achieve the encampments? Well, they were really organized. They knew exactly where to go, how to place, how to put people around it to drive media out of there and whatnot. And how are they able to be so organized? Well, they have so much funding in order to destabilize everything. Because all these riots, encampments, protests, they're there for one reason, and it's just to ensure that they destabilize the society as much as they can.
Yeah, and there is a website that I tell everybody to go to. I've spoken about it many times, and I've made a lot of videos on it. It's called beautifultrouble.org, and it is a leftist activist training website. So its job is to show you how to become basically an insurgent to the system. It shows you their strategies, their tactics, what they believe, why they go and why they do what they do. So once you start reading this website, you can understand exactly what they're going after. They're going after chaos because their point is to destroy the capitalist system that has raised so many people out of poverty, more than we've ever seen, even in the last 50 years. Their job is to essentially become a useful idiot for the people at the top who are tricking them into believing that they're doing a good for society, for the environment, for other people who are oppressed. These are useful idiots. And I know, David, we talk about a lot. The useful idiots were the Red Guard in China. And I don't understand how people on the left can say they're so intelligent and not read history and not see in what's happening now, in what happened in China.
Well, we know this because they are intellectual in a sense, and that's why they become useful idiots, right? Because you're able to drive a certain idea to them, and they believe that that is the right idea for whatever reason that they chose it to be. And because they are seen to be the intellectual ones, they are the ones that are more likely to bring the others to actually change this. And we know this, that with useful idiots, majority of the time, is that they are going to be the first ones to be killed, completely taken out of the regime, because they realize what they ushered in. They want to essentially have a revolution against what they ushered in. And that's what makes them such useful idiots. They will bring all of this stuff to it, and then they'll realize it, and then they'll be the first ones to
it'll be too late.
And it'll be too late. Exactly.
And also the thing is, and I've spent time around these people now. If you're a self-proclaimed intellectual, the most gut-wrenching thing is to admit that you were wrong. And I was on a flight. I was telling you a story. I was on a flight back from Sweden a few days ago, and to my right there was a lady who was a climate change professor at a university, and she took out her laptop. She was making all these lessons for children, and I spoke to her a bit. I didn't say, I didn't want to get into a confrontation with her because it was a long flight and I was very tired, but I basically looked at her and I said, "Oh, you're a climate change professor. That's interesting." And she said, "Yeah, we're doing a bunch of stuff." And what they've done is they've connected every bad thing in life to climate change. They've done a very good job at it. So some of the studies that she was looking at is anxiety in children, the rise in anxiety, but they didn't tie it to the rise in medication or the rise of obesity or they tied it to climate change, right? Then you have mental health. Then you have all these other things, and they've done a very good job of linking these random studies that, of course, we know are very falsified to climate change. So if you're a kid going through university, every bad thing you learn, it's because climate change. It's because climate change. It's because climate change. So they're creating zealots, and they're saying this is the problem. Not everything else. Don't worry about medication. Don't worry about single-family household. Don't worry about degradation of the middle class. It's climate change. And they've done a good job at that.
They've done a really good job of that. And we know that James Lindsay actually talks about this a whole lot, that this is the idea of being woke, that you're putting all of these social justice issues in the forefront that don't actually impact your overall life or the life of your fellow, classmates, whatever it is, right? We can all say here and agree that even if we try to handle climate change or whatever it is, implement net zero, we still have to tackle India and China. And the most important thing about this is that none of this stuff is as important to us as, for example, not being able to afford groceries, as not being able to afford rent anymore, right? And when people put these social issues in the forefront above anything else, that's when we start to have an issue. And that's actually what James Lindsay talks about. What is the wokeification of the left, is that they've suddenly allowed these social issues that won't actually impact them or make their lives better at all supersede very basic things like maybe it's an issue for me that I can't afford certain products, or maybe I can't afford my rent anymore and I have to cut back on certain stuff, right? For some reason, these problems go secondary to things like climate.
Yeah. And also they convince you that the problem is capitalism, when capitalism created the conditions to have such cheap oil and gas and all these products because of competition. But now they said, listen, the world, everything's getting more expensive and it's capitalism's fault. But they don't attribute the reason for things being so cheap in the first place to capitalism. I mean, it's just insane. It's like, it's so illogical, but then they twist things and then they convince these smart people that the problem really is capitalism. But where did the good times come from in the first place?
Yeah.
It wasn't socialism, it wasn't communism, it was capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. This conversation actually brings me back to like the Trump rally, because when we were asking Trump supporters why they're voting for Trump, and we were trying to find not your usual demographic, like, right? We're looking for the people that were like, okay, Democrats will call them racist, or Democrats say that there's no such type of voters, right? So I came up to a black individual. He looks like he's straight from, the hood. I know Atlanta well. I know exactly where he came from, right? He was wearing chains. Belt was like all the way below his man part, stogie, if you don't know what stogie, a cigarette in his hand and whatnot. And I asked him, why do you support Trump? And he gave me the most basic understanding of why. This is what really matters to average Americans.
Support Trump.
Well, my living conditions always been better. About all presidents, this president has did way much more for the USA. And all that racism stuff, that's bullshit. Dig deep inside, and then you can understand what he mean when things coming out his mouth. So that guy right there is the guy for 2024!
Trump is not even out here and people are going this crazy. But if
Yeah, so Fabian, that brings me back to the basics. He said that life under Trump was way better. He said that he's done more for the United States than realistically any president of his lifetime. And all that racist stuff, when you actually look into it, you realize this is just a BS narrative. This has been debunked. This is just a narrative that's being propagated by people that are completely against Trump and whatnot. And this gives me some sort of optimism, because it's like, okay, wow, there are average Americans who are doing the due diligence. They are willing to find the truth, essentially.
Yeah. But the problem is the Democratic Party has used black people for so long. And now they're finally starting to wake up. Finally, right? They were awake. And then after all this stuff happened, Planned Parenthood, CIA coming into rap music and creating gangster rap, and then the whole crack cocaine epidemic. I mean, there's been a lot of bad stuff that has been perpetrated by the government for the African-American community to keep them voting Democrat. And now they're waking up. And what happens as soon as they start waking up? Oh, forget them. Next one is going to be the immigrants. Hey, immigrants, come in. And even, black people in black areas are like, hey, why are all these immigrants coming in? And they're coming into these exact same positions that people before them had been in, let's say like white people, right? But they're not getting white people to vote for them anymore, unless you're a white liberal woman, and then you're obviously a Democrat, which unfortunately something like 80% of them are taking medication and 60% have a mental illness, which is just so sad. But the black people are starting to wake up. So now they're bringing in immigrants and said, okay, you're our new black people. Democrats are like, you are going to be our new Democrats, our new black voting population. You can't vote. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Just keep voting. And I was in Colombia a few months ago, David, and I spoke to people. I said, what do you think about, do you like Trump or Biden? And most of the people I spoke to said Biden. I said, why? And he said, because he opened the borders. So to them, that's a number one issue, because they want to go in, and who do you think they're going to vote for?
Yeah, and listen, it's a good point. We've heard it for the last year now that Republicans are the ones that don't care about solving the border issue. the funny thing about it is that every border bill that's been proposed by Democrats or even some establishment Republicans has only incentivized illegal immigrants to come here. So when you tell me that you're in Colombia and you're asking people, who do you like more, Trump or Biden? Of course they're going to say Biden. They're going to say whoever the Democrat president administration is, because realistically, Democrats don't want to solve that border issue, which just to go back to the Trump rally, the black guy that we were speaking to, that's a perfect representation of an individual that is being negatively impacted by an open southern border. And we'll do a segment, of course, and we'll talk about the border and whatnot and how that impacts average Americans and how Democrats don't want to have essentially don't deter illegal immigration from happening. But that's a great point. There's a reason why the Democrats are moving away from the black community to their new minority community. And this minority community isn't even Hispanics, because Hispanics are leaving them, right? It's illegal immigrants, because illegal immigrants are receiving such benefits coming to the United States.
And, you know, I was thinking about this. It's actually, if you think about it, it's a very intelligent move from their part, even though it's evil. Because if you can make black Americans vote for you, right? That's one population of people, right? That's one section of the population of people. So you can say, look, black voters, here's why Democrats are not good for you. Now, how do you do that if you import hundreds of different ethnicities all at once? How do you, and let's say as a Republican Party, fight against that? It's so disconnected. How do you reach those people? If it's black Americans, yes, there's leaders in the black community, right? You have black churches, there's some foundation there. But these minorities, how do you even get to them? They speak multiple languages. They're from all over, and they all came all at once. So there's no foundation, there's no leadership to go to yet. So it's going to be hard to reach those people and say, hey, the only way we can do it is to get them all on Twitter and let them really see the truth.
Well, listen, the crazy thing that you actually mentioned that is because in the porta parties in immigration centers right at the southern border, while in Mexico still, they are handing out flyers, and they literally found these in the porta parties and whatnot, them handing out flyers saying, hey, you may not be able to vote for Biden or Kamala now, they would probably say, right now as you get into the United States, but we're creating pathways for you to be able to actually vote, whether it's a express route to citizenship or it's actually implementing state laws, local laws that will allow illegal immigrants to access the ballot. And that is absolutely crazy. There are literally NGOs currently right now being subsidized by the federal government, receiving our taxpayer money, telling illegal immigrants that don't worry, you can vote right now, but when you do, please vote for Biden, please vote for Kamala. They're the ones that are bringing you inside the United States. And for the people who will say, well, this sounds like propaganda, this isn't, please look it up. These NGOs, and the crazy thing about it is a majority of these NGOs are Catholic NGOs. And that's what's shocking to me, is that their religions are part of this.
We know that the Pope has said that he believes that it's ungodly unless to not allow unfettered immigration into your country, right? The Catholic Church is not working on a climate change agenda. So the Pope is woke. The Pope is super woke. We just had the Archbishop, but the Pope also said faggotry the other day. So it's like, come on, Pope, you can't play both sides, bro. You gotta either be woke or unwoke. But yeah, the Catholic Church, this entire thing, we can go on for hours on it, and we will, because it's such an interesting topic. But we did want to get to our next topic coming up here pretty soon, which was the poll battleground update, because a lot of polls have been coming out. We haven't been covering them because we've been on a hiatus, but we're going to cover them right after this commercial break.
All right, and welcome back to some Battleground poll updates. So it's been a shakeup lately when it comes down to who the candidates are, but not on the Republican side, on the Democrat side. So Trump was actually doing historical laps around Biden when he was the nominee, or presumed to be the nominee. He was the incumbent, right? Whether it was across battleground states, and he was just up on him 5, 6, 7 points in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or it was him just historically pulling more for himself, more women to vote for him than Biden. He was increasing with the minorities, the Hispanics, the blacks, everything like that. It was looking fantastic. It was looking like a Ronald Reagan landslide, essentially, Fabian, that Trump was going to win. But things changed recently, and this just so happened to be after two big things. After the debate, which was absolutely horrible for Biden. I've never seen CNN post-debate say that Trump or a Republican actually won the debate, which just shows you how terrible he was. And we'll talk about this in a second let's talk about it right now, how the media was engaged in this cover up because they acted all shocked after the debate. We didn't know Biden was like this. What, did you guys disregard everything we've said for the past 3-4 years? So that's one big factor to it. And of course, there was the assassination attempt, right? And after the assassination attempt, there wasn't a huge spike in Trump's like polling. But then 2-3 days later, the spike occurred. And 3-4 days after that, a week after Trump, there was an assassination attempt on Trump. That's when we saw Biden officially. He went into the house, into his Delaware house on Saturday. Sunday, they came out and they said, "That's it. Kamala, we support Kamala to be it." Right. So we've received a lot of new updates when it comes down to the polling. There's this first like honeymoon phase when it comes to Kamala, right? That, oh my God, we want her, we love her. She's the fresh breath of air we've needed. We don't want Biden. We don't want Trump. We don't want Clinton or any of this stuff. Kamala, yes. She essentially had Biden's campaign while Biden was president. Every time she would come out, she would say some ridiculous stuff. She was the least popular vice president on record, I think, since we started polling in like 1970 or so. She was historically low. So I thought that she would come into office, or she'd come into this nominee and perhaps get a little spike. But we've seen a little bit more than that spike. And perhaps we're still in that honeymoon phase because realistically, we haven't seen her get challenged in an interview form, right? She hasn't gone to any opposing outlet to be interviewed. She hasn't had a debate with Trump either. So there's various things that perhaps are the reason why she's polling higher than I believe she should be polling. So if we could pull up on the screen the 270 to win map, because Nate Silver has updated recently the overall 270 to win map. And we'll see here in a second. But at one point, we were getting over 300 electoral points for the Republicans. As you guys can see, that dipped down to 251. Whereas Democrats are now polling at somewhere, at 226. The battleground states remain to be the battleground states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. That is your blue wall. Minnesota has now gone back to being blue leaning versus it being a battleground state. Nevada, Arizona, these are still your battleground states. The one thing I want you guys to pay attention to is what the demographics are showing us. Well, actually, before we get into the demographics, what I want to pull up here is Nate Silver's electoral prediction and how it has changed, because July 31st, he predicted that Trump still has about a 60 to a 35% chance of winning the election, meaning that he has about 65% chance of winning the election. Kamala has about 30 to 35. Well, that recently, Fabian, just yesterday, crossed paths, meaning that Kamala is, according to their prediction, has a 51% chance of winning the election, and Trump has about a 49% chance of winning the election. So what do you think about this so far? Why has Kamala spiked so much in the polls, essentially completely took any lead that Trump had on Biden? What do you think?
So what I see, and I'm from California, so we don't get Kamala Harris advertising because she's from California. So they figured, why spend money in California? We got it in the bag. We have Newsom destroying the state. They don't think that we're going to vote red. And I'm telling people, watch the Los Angeles vote, because I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised. But when I came here, we saw an advertisement yesterday of Kamala Harris on television. And I looked at you and I said, that's a really good commercial. They have this massive media team who are trying to make an incompetent person seem competent. We've seen them do it with Biden, but with Kamala Harris, it's fresh. If you don't know anything, if you're a low information voter, if you're just a person living your life, not really paying attention to politics, and you see her, they had her at rallies talking to children, saying the exact same things that every Democratic candidate before that has done. If you look at Hillary Clinton's commercials back in the day, it's about border security, it's about crime, it's about putting food on the table. It's the most basic politician commercial you could ever make. But because people are pre-programmed to say, oh, that's what everyone else is talking about, those must be good, then let me equate these Democratic staples with this new person putting up. But if you go on Twitter and you actually look at how Kamala Harris and how she speaks, she's worse than a child. And David, dare I say this? And this is a big statement. She is worse than Sarah Palin.
Whoa.
I'm going to come out and say she's worse than Sarah Palin.
That's a big claim, my friend.
That's a big one.
Well, I mean, it's true. And we've seen that, right? We've seen Kamala every time she has any public meeting, whether it's with foreign allies or it's actually here in the United States. She says the weirdest things. What's burdened by unburdened, or whatever that phrase is, right? That's what makes her the least popular VP that we've historically seen. And Fabian, I think you say it perfectly. I mean, she probably is worse than Sarah Palin when it comes down to messaging, when it comes down to talking, the way she articulates herself and expresses herself, which is crazy to me. People know that, but they haven't seen too much of it, which is why I think these polls will adjust in the coming weeks, maybe months. We don't have too much. We have like 3 months or whatever. But definitely after the debate, we should see the actual representations in the polls of what Americans think about her. Because right now, I think the spike of polls is essentially very simple to understand. It's not Trump candidate. It's not Biden. It's somebody different. And people, for some reason, like that. And whatever.
Yeah, everyone likes a shiny new toy in the very beginning. But then when you realize the commercial doesn't match what the toy's usability is, just like in Toy Story, it gets thrown away, right? It gets thrown over there and you don't use the toy anymore. So Kamala Harris is going through exactly what you would expect a brand new candidate to come with brand new commercials. Democratic Party was so tired of Joe Biden. Independents as well were so tired of him. Now they're looking at Kamala Harris and they're saying, oh, cool. Yeah, I might vote for her. Let a few more weeks, a few more months come out when at post-debate, like you said, David, after she debates Trump, I think it's going to be, he's going to wipe the floor with her. She got 0 primary votes when she ran in 2020. She got, 0 delegates, literally 0 delegates during the primaries. She was polling in the single digits. And all of a sudden, you're going to tell me that the person who nobody wanted, now half the people want? Come on. Like people people have wised up to that.
They have. And hopefully they'll vote based on what their policy is, because we're going to look at some policy stuff here in a second of what more Americans trust and who do they trust more. If we can pull up on the screen the Bloomberg recent battleground update, and it'll show us the polls, because I do want to go and show you guys the spike that I'm talking about. Again, this is Bloomberg. This is Morning Consult. This is a very, very, they're rated pretty high in terms of when they come to their accuracy. And these were polls that we were referencing when Trump was beating Biden. So it's only fair that we reference them when we talk about Kamala. So first of all, let's look at all swing states. All swing states combined, Kamala has a 1-point lead over Trump, which is crazy to see that. So you can literally see the spikes in there. Arizona, she's now 2 points over, 49 to 47. Michigan, that's probably the biggest thing we've seen. I guess Biden was really unpopular in Michigan, but all of a sudden, Kamala introduces something new. I don't know. We'll look into that. But 53 to 42 in Michigan. Wisconsin, she crossed the path, right? In Pennsylvania, Trump still has a lead on, which I'm curious to know, how much of a factor is that because of the assassination attempt? What do you think?
Well, having spent a lot of time there and actually owning businesses in Pennsylvania, I can say that it's going to be a lot harder to convince the union guys to vote for Kamala, just like it was really hard to convince them to vote for Hillary, because they know bullshit when they see it. And a lot of those guys are on Twitter. So, and they talk amongst themselves, when they're out working. As far as the women, it's a blue state, but it's a blue collar state.
It is.
So that's part of why I feel. And beyond that is Pittsburgh has been hit extremely hard, and Pennsylvania as a whole, by the economy, because it was already a blue collar state. So people are feeling the hurt right now. They're feeling the pain. And I don't think these little commercials of, oh yeah, she's going to help the economy. It's like, dude, she was the one for the last 4 years that created the economy. So how are you going to help something you created, right?
Yeah, and another factor to the economy is illegal immigration, because with an open border like that, blue-collar jobs are being impacted, not with illegal immigrants taking their jobs, but specifically with fentanyl pouring through the country, right? And we know that a lot of these blue-collar states, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, these states are some of the biggest ones to be impacted by the opiate crisis. And majority of that is because China manufactures fentanyl, sends it to the cartel in Mexico. They smuggle it through the open southern border into the United States. And that's how blue-collar jobs also get impacted, or blue-collar workers get impacted, the economy and illegal immigration. I want to pull up another thing on our screen here. So when it comes down to important things for people like immigration and the economy, Trump outright beats Kamala every single poll that we see. The only time that we see Kamala beating anything related to actual topics or issues for voters, it's social issues, whether that is abortion, whether it's climate related stuff or whatever. So
that's really important, because some things in this race have not changed. The idea that you would be better off financially if Trump were elected, Trump still has a big advantage over now Kamala Harris on that. And the idea that his policies would slow or decrease the number of migrants trying to cross the border, that he still has an edge on. That's really important, because some things in this race have not changed. The idea that you would be better off financially if Trump were elected, Trump still has a big advantage over now Kamala Harris on that. And
absolutely crazy to see, right? Because things that actually matter to Americans, Trump outright beats Kamala. immigration, the economy. We can actually load up the next poll on there as well, so we can actually see the specific issues that he's beating her in, because it's crazy. Out of the 5 issues that are labeled, 4 of those are actual issues, where one of them are social issues like abortion. And you can see that Trump consistently is just beating her everywhere, right? So immigration, he has a 13-point lead on her. The economy, a 12-point lead. Let's skip abortion for a second. Crime, a 5-point lead. Foreign relations, even a 4-point lead. But when we enter abortion or we enter climate change isn't on this one, but I've seen the longer version of this poll, she outright beats him in everything. Women rights, this right, all of this stuff. And it's crazy to me, Fabian, that will voters actually put things that matter to them in the forefront, like crime, like foreign issues, especially with what's going geopolitically right now, immigration, the economy, or will voters pick and choose based on the social issues like abortion and climate change?
You know, unfortunately, growing up in church, I've seen a lot of single issue voters on the Republican side when it comes to abortion, right? I remember when George Bush was running, it was like, well, but he's pro-life. And that was a single issue. And the same thing happens on the left, right? I just posted a meme the other day about a donkey, and there's a lady who's all battered and bruised up, and the donkey's buff, has a wife beater on, and he's drinking a beer, and it says, high crime, more immigration, bad economy. And then the donkey looks at her and says, don't leave me, bitch. And then she says, as long as I have abortions, as long as I have abortions. So it's like these women are being, they're just being abused by the Democratic Party. But if they focus on one issue, these Democratic liberal women, that's all they care about. And they will take everything else. But here's what's interesting about this. I just thought about this right now. These women are willing to give up every single thing just to have individual rights. Isn't that crazy? Like, they're willing to give up everything just to have individual rights, but they want to give up all rights at the same time. So you can't have it both ways, liberal women. Do you want bodily autonomy, which you think is a good thing? Or do you want to give up all your rights, which you're kind of already doing? So you're basically giving up all your rights and everything else just to hold on to this one thing, which is kind of what classic liberals and conservatives want. Leave me alone. Obviously their issue is where they're killing babies, but the concept is the same.
It is. I think the most important thing to acknowledge here is that there is nothing that Kamala can do to address the abortion issue. And I wish that Republicans, if you're listening, that you would message this better when it comes down to abortion. There is nothing that the executive branch can do about abortions right now. That means that abortion shouldn't be on the ballot when it comes down when you vote in November. Kamala is not going to do it. They didn't codify it when they had a chance. They're not going to do it with Kamala. They can't pass legislation anyways because the Supreme Court is going to strike it down for saying that these are state rights. We have it now in the best situation possible where it's up to the state to determine it. So Kansas, if they want to outright reject it on the ballot, which they did, they can do that. And if Republicans learn to handle this messaging better to make people understand, like, hey, listen, it's not going to be on the ballot when you go vote in November, meaning that if you vote Kamala, she's not going to do anything for abortions. Just as much if you vote for Trump, he's not going to put a federal ban on abortion. He's already distanced himself from that. He's more socially liberal. That's actually what's crazy to me, is that he's more in the middle than Kamala is, than Biden is, right? And that is supposed to be attractive, especially when we see polls like first trimester abortion support is like 60-70% in the United States. Second, it's 20. Third trimester, it's like 8%. So majority of Americans agree about the first trimester. Then it goes increasingly down when it comes down to the second, third. Second, third is what Kamala, Biden, that administration proposes and in favor of. Whereas Trump says, hey, listen, it's up to the states. So if Kansas wants to reject it, they'll reject it. We're not going to impose some federal legislation or anything.
Yeah, I mean, imagine states being able to do whatever they want to do, kind of like how it was meant to be, being a constitutional republic. I mean, imagine that. I know, leftists want to centralize all power in not even an American government, because they don't want the American government. They don't want a democratically run country. They want a socialist country. So they're even at odds with what they want. So if you're a leftist, how do you even come to terms with exactly what it is that you want? Because you want bodily autonomy, but you want to give up all rights to the state. It still doesn't make any sense. Think about that. You can't marry those two things. It doesn't work. It literally logically and biologically and physically doesn't work.
Well, Fabian, you got to remember who we're talking about here. We're talking about Democrats who don't have common sense, aren't logical thinkers, right? So all of this stuff really doesn't matter to them, but it's so easy and it's so in front of us that we're sitting here like, how did they not see this? How
as long as they feel like they're winning, that's what they want. They want to feel like they're winning.
Exactly. Well, that does it to our battleground updates, or just in general, our poll updates, right? Because it's been so long. We have a new candidate now. So we'll be updating you guys on a weekly basis, if not even more than once a week, because polls right now are so important. Fabian, is there anything else that you want to say or talk about before we close this show off?
Yeah, I would just say thank you for being here, everyone. It's our very first show in the new studio, so it's going to only get better from here. We already got strikes on our TikTok because we have been going TikTok live. Apparently, this is hate speech according to TikTok, which is unfathomable to me, talking about real issues. But thank you for being here so much. Make sure you follow us on all socials, breakaway_USA. I am Fabian Lux on all socials except for Twitter. I'm Fabian_7076. And David,
you can find me everywhere, Instagram, YouTube. I type in my first name and last name, David, Khait. In some places, you may need a underscore in the middle of that, but you'll find me there. As long as it allows us, right?
As long as it allows it. Yeah.
So, and last thing, we got a couple questions here in TikTok and whatnot. Our plan is to, in the following shows, to actually give about 2-3 minutes at the end of our show to look through TikTok, because they get a little behind the scenes action of what's happening. Maybe answer a few questions in there. But that wraps it up for our first show. Make sure that you tune in every single day to our show, because you'll get amazing perspectives here with Breakaway with David and Fabian.
All right. See you guys next time. See ya.